and welcome back to Build Propulsion Lab at JCON Europe, comes to live from Cologne, Germany. And my next guest is Simon Martinelli. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk with Simon about CQRS with Java.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's pretend I have no idea what this acronym means. What is CQRS?
CQRS stands for Command Query Responsibility Segregation. And the idea is that you separate read from writing data or executing.
It sounds familiar to me in the context of web security, maybe?
No, not really.
Not really. So
really.
I confuse it with something else. Okay, all right. So separating responsibility between reading and writing.
Exactly.
Why do we need it? What it has to do with anything? What it has to do with Java?
The idea is that to make your API, for example, more expressive. So you say you have commands. So you don't send like a data structure and say, just do something with it, like you do it when you have a RESTful API, but you send a command. So for example, instead of sending an order, you send a command, create order. And then you send just the data you need to create an order. And this is a separate model from, if you want to read the orders, then you get the full order back, but that's not the same object that you send for the command. It's just the one that you get when you
Okay, so, but isn't it like more complicated because it's almost like I need to have now two models instead of one? Why would I want that? I have an order, if I need to change something, I change something in the order, I send the order back, done.
Exactly.
Why different? Why two models?
There are some advantages. First of all, you're right. There are disadvantages. You have separate models. You have to maintain both. But on the other hand, especially for the query model, you can use a model that really fits the needs of your consumers. So sometimes if you do like CRUD operations, then it's probably not a good solution, right? Because there you have an order, you send the order, you get the order back. But for example, if you have a product management system and you want to get information about the product, you maybe don't need all the information, or you want to aggregate it, or you want to have like, what you also can do with CQRS, you could, if you like to, separate the database for querying and writing. So that means in terms of a product management system, you could say, okay, my products live in a relational database, but for querying, I use a search engine, like Elasticsearch or Solr. And there I have an optimal model to get my data out of that, and I have all the search functionality with facets and stuff like that, and that could be beneficial.
Okay.
But you don't have to do that, you can just keep your database.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But then I guess the magic is that we can somehow overcome the disadvantage of have separate models and have to rewrite code, like duplicate code and all this kind of stuff. So there is some magic that helps us overcome the biggest disadvantage.
Yeah. But one of my preferred, let's say, advantages is that it's more clear. So from a client perspective, you get a lot of semantics in that because you have a command. So if you look at the client code, let's say it's an Angular application, for example, you see a call with a command, and instead doing just a post to some URL, you really have a command object, and this says create order. And so it's very clear to understand what happens there. So you don't have to guess what the REST API does, you just have that. So it's more kind of a, let's say, RPC style that we had in the past, but it adds more semantic to your API. So in my opinion, when you look at the REST APIs, they're great if you do third-party APIs. So let's say you're a company and you have your product data and you say, everybody can search for that and use it, do whatever they like to. But you have an internal API with the client that is very closely bound to the server. So you have like client-server application. Probably this is a better model.
It makes sense. Okay, now tell me, how do I overcome the disadvantage of having different models? There is a trick, I'm sure.
There is not really a trick, but the point is the command and the query model is like the DTO model, let's say. So you could perfectly have like an entity model that is also mapped by Hibernate or something else, or you can store it in MongoDB, it doesn't matter. And the commands will just change your entities, right? And on the other hand, you have the query model that fits whatever you need. I use JCON, for example, for that.
Yep.
Because JCON has a superpower, it's called multi-set, and they can read nested structures. So
Here you go.
Scene JCON uses JSON functionality of the database, and it creates a nested structure.
This is how you build the other models, which are like view and can be a subset or a superset or a combination of stuff. That's exactly how you do it.
That's like I do it.
Okay.
And CQRS has another advantage because you have commands. You could also like execute business logic, and business logic could create events. And so, if you like to, it's not so simple because it adds additional complexity, but you can have an event store. And you can use the event store to populate your query model. So that means you could have a stream, and then like Elasticsearch can consume the stream and update
the search index.
Yeah,
that makes sense. That makes sense. I think there is like a lot to unpack on how you really do it, and I guess your talk was exactly about that. So, except of watching your talk, that you all definitely should do, what are other resources do I have if I want to get an example of how do I do it with a system like a product, for example?
Yeah. So first of all, if you are interested in CQRS, CQRS was first mentioned by Greg Young and later by Martin Fowler. And Greg Young wrote a paper about that. It's like 14 years ago, I would say. And this is brilliant. So because he shows that there are multiple stages. So first you can start with the command and the query model with a single database, and then you can split the database. You can add an event store. So it has several steps or stages when you want to apply CQRS. So this is the way to start, in my opinion. Then you can have a look at my example, how I do it with JCON.
Here you go. Here you go. When do we check that? Where do we see that?
You can go to GitHub. My GitHub user is simas.ch.
Like the Twitter handle that you see right here on the bottom of the screen?
Just without the underscore.
Yep.
And then you also can have a look at Twitter. By the way, there should be posts about that, and you will find the repo there.
Excellent. All right, folks, so here you have it. CQRS from Simon. Take a look. Looks very interesting to me, but also like a big topic that we need to learn and study.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for coming, Simon, and you all stay tuned. We have more interviews. Miro is hiding somewhere in the shadows over there. He will be our next guest, just a couple of minutes. And Simon, thank you again for coming.
Thanks for having me.